During this session, we're going to cover how to create seamless textures that can be put in SketchUp. So the Paint Bucket tool has a great variety of different seamless textures, but sometimes you might need something specific to the project, perhaps fabric or wallpaper that a client might want. We're going to cover a seamless texture technique that can be found at this particular link. And this is the image that they use to create a seamless texture from. Now the idea is that a seamless texture does not have any visible edge as it repeats itself. So this image here is seamless, where this one is not. And we can kind of see it even better if you just look at that one square that is the seamless piece. If you take a look here, this is the piece that's been repeated 4 times. This is the piece here as well. Again, you can't really tell. You can't tell there's a line here or here in the way it works out. And Photoshop can help us create images that are seamless from just regular images. Now sometimes you might think that, well, if there's no real hard edge, it'll repeat itself well. And so these are 2 examples of it. I mean, there's no real edge here. There's no lines that are visible in this. But notice what happens when we tile them across. Then you can start seeing where those edges and those lines occur, right? It's just the natural way that light is bouncing off and how there's variability of it. So we don't want to produce something like this. That's not our end game. Because you see these splotches, you see this thing that kind of repeats itself, the lights and the darks, lights and darks. You want something more along this line where everything's kind of smooth. Even though there is repetition, it's not an obvious right away. So we're going to use Photoshop, and again, using this technique that this one did on this link here, we're going to take this stone image and create a seamless texture out of it. So we'll go to File, Open. And inside here, there's a rock face JPG file, JPEG. And so here's our rock face original or starting image. We're going to use the filter. We're going to look at the image and look at image size. And we can see that it is, change it to pixels, it is 681 by 511. We'd like to do that so that we can shift the image halfway up and halfway over. So we'll go to Filter, Other, and Offset. Filter, Other, Offset. And here's what I'm talking about. We're going to want the horizontal to be about 340 pixels to the right, and the vertical to be about 250 pixels. And you can now see what our problem is. Some of the image is dark. Some of the image is light, some have blue casts, some are more like gray. These are the variations that we're going to try to diminish or lessen so that we have a more even tone across. Let's go back to Edit, Undo, and now that we see what the situation is, we can go ahead and start finding ways to resolve that. What we're going to do is we're going to duplicate the layer. So here's the background layer, we right-click, Duplicate Layer. And I'm going to call it High Pass, because that's the filter we'll be using on this particular one. And then on top of that here, instead of just regular normal, I'm going to click there, I'm going to select luminosity. So the way that this layer interacts with one below it is based on luminosity. And it changes, leaves the colors mostly intact, but it only affects the luminosity of a layer. Nothing's much different right now because they're the same image right on top of itself. So this one here should be the active layer, and we're going to go to Filter, Other, High Pass. So here's where we start with on the High Pass filter. And what we want to do is we want to get it to a point where we don't see a lot of variation, but at the same time it doesn't become all gray. So if we click and drag this to one end, we'll see a lot of variation. We click and drag this to the other end, it's just a solid gray. They've blurred everything out to be very equal. So you want a little bit of that variation to be visible, but you don't want it to be too much. I put it at about 50. Clicked OK. Again, the reason we like this particular image is because of some of this variation going on, so we don't want to make it all go away necessarily. So the high pass removed the large blurry details, and the sharp ones still remain. And high pass basically only works with this relative texture that's the same thing all the way across. So if I make it not visible, you can see what changes happen. So if I take off the high pass, you can see the darks are very dark, and then all of a sudden put that high pass over it. There's a more even tone, right? Which is what we're shooting for. Since this looks pretty good, I'm going to go ahead and flatten the image. That means that I've taken both these layers, and I'm going to move them into one layer so that I can go ahead and see how this high pass affected the tiling. So I'm going to right click, flatten image. So it's again just one image again. So now it's the same one image. Let's go ahead and go to filter, other, offset. And you can see we still have some issues, but it's much better than before. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and try and get rid of these lines by blending them. In other words, I know that this edge will be perfect when it lines up down here because it's the same edge. In other words, as this keeps on going, this will repeat. And this was the edge it was before. We shifted it over, we shifted it up. We just rotated the image on itself. So I'll use with the healing brush tool. And I think for size of the tool, let's make it about 50 or so. Again, some of these sizes I'm giving you are more just do some guesstimate, what looks about right, about the size I'm looking for. I also make sure I have content aware selected. And then the other thing I'd like to do too is instead of going straight across and straight down, I kind of wiggle my mouse just a little bit. I just feel maybe it gives a more areas of blending than just a straight line across. Sometimes they become very obvious. I think it makes it just a little bit less noticeable. There is still an obvious color difference. I mean, this upper portion here is a lot bluer than this bottom portion. So our next step will be to kind of work with that. What I'll do is, here's our background. We're going to duplicate this layer again. I'm going to call it color because that's what I'm going to do for it. And the opacity, I'm going to go ahead and bring it down to about 50%. And this, instead of normal, I'm going to select color as the way the two layers are going to kind of interact with each other. Now, if you remember, the top is bluish, the bottom is grayish. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to flip this top layer 180 degrees. Then the color layer that is gray down here will come up here. And we'll start interacting with the color layer up on the upper portion, and then the same thing, this background, this upper bluish will come down here. So I've selected this color layer, go to Edit, and then Transform, and I'm going to go ahead and just do Flip Vertical. That'll flip it. Now at first you may not have noticed any difference, but when you go ahead and turn the layer on and off, you can see what's doing, how it becomes, it's become a general kind of bluish, grayish tone throughout, but we still have some variation. And that's what we're looking for. We don't want it to be just one solid. We still have a little bit of blue showing, a little bit of the pinkish colored rocks, a little bit of gray, and some details still there. So that is all great. Let's go ahead and flatten the image. Right click, flatten image. And then let's give it a name, File, Save As. I don't want to save it with the same name because that will destroy the original file, right? We want to do a different one. So I'm going to Save As. I'm going to call it Rock Face 2. And that way, the original is still there if I have to go back to it for any reason. Let's go ahead and open up the file in SketchUp. So I've opened up SketchUp, and what I'll do is I'm just going to make a rectangle. I'll orient myself like this. I'll make a rectangle, something like that. Let's say that's the wall that we're going to put this rock face on. And then I'll go File, Import. And here is Rock Face 2. Make sure it's set to Texture and click on Import. And then just hover on the surface here and just kind of click and drag a size that you think is about right. And click. And then it will repeat itself. And what you're looking for is that you don't want to see a repetition of the lines, right, of the different surfaces. And It's pretty good, except when you do this kind of stuff, you might see something else that you might want to address. And here it is on this particular piece. There's a piece here of this triangular wedge here that seems to be, too obvious. That's too obvious a thing to leave alone. And so I need to see if I can find this piece on the actual image. So going to Photoshop again. Well, now I see it pretty obviously now that that's there. So what I'll do is I'll use the stamp tool here, and I will just kind of pick a surface over here perhaps. So I'll hold down the Alt key and I'll pick a surface like over here, not right next to it, but like way over here somewhere. And then I will use my brackets to make this circle a little bit larger. We're using this brush size here. I think the soft round would be a good brush, something like 50, 70, something like that. And I'm just gonna go ahead and just kind of go over that spot. And that looks pretty good. While I'm at it, I'm just gonna take a look and see if anything kind of stands out. I think that's pretty good right now. Perhaps this area here, this looks kind of a little, there's still like a line feel to it. Even though that's not where the line occurred, it feels like there is something there. So I'm just gonna go ahead and kind of grab another spot over here and kind of clean it up a little bit, make it not quite as dark. So what's nice about, again, the stamp tool works well. Let's go to File, Save As. I'm gonna save it as Rock Face 3 this time. And then go back to the SketchUp file. So here it is. I don't have to bring it back in. Let's say this is exactly the scale I need for this particular project. So I don't need to go back in again. What I'll do is use my paint bucket tool and hold down the Alt key and pick up that material, and then go to the Edit. And down here, I'm going to open up the folder to grab another image, and here's Rock Face 3. So by doing that, I'm going to replace this image of Rock Face 2 with this image of Rock Face 3. And you can see right away, it looks much better. It really does. The other one might be this area here. We can maybe touch up a little bit. But I think you have the idea of how we would go back and forth and just make sure that everything looks good. Let's turn now back to Photoshop and work on a different project. File, Open. We're going to open up Stone Wall. So this image is a little different than the other one in that these are like definite shapes of stone edges. There's still some variation. You can certainly see, I mean, it's obvious now, this will be an issue, right? So that one we can take care of even before we work on it. But on this situation, I'm not sure if I'd like to use this high pass or the color and all that kind of stuff, because we have definitive edges and definitive shapes here that we're going to want to keep. So how can we do that easily? Well, again, the first thing we know is that has got to be resolved. So I will use the clone stamp tool, and I might make this just a little bit smaller because now we're going to be a little bit more exact. I'm also going to zoom up a little bit on this. What I'll do is I'm going to just kind of hold the Alt key down. I'm just going to grab right about here, and just kind of click and drag until that. There you go. That works pretty well. Maybe we'll grab it here and just kind of get that area there, so it looks different. This one here I'm going to grab from this side. And I'm grabbing from this side so I can get that angle, bottom angle here, because there's a bottom angle here. This one was easy straight across, but this one's got a bit of an angle, so I'm going to grab from there, and I'm going to click and drag, click and drag, click and drag, and then I'm just going to, there. All right, so we've kind of got these here. I'm going to go ahead and grab this here, over here a little bit. See that little line? That line here is too close together, so I'm just going to kind of grab that so it's not as obvious. All right, now we've got this taken care of. We don't see that bright white slash down it, so when it repeats itself, I mean, we're going to have some things to deal with about the background, but we'll take care of that later. Right now I want to see how these stones work. So as before, I'm going to go to image size, and I'm seeing what the image size is. Okay, so half the size here would be about maybe 440 by 250. All right, so filter, other, offset. I want to do it this way. I don't want to go to this offset here at the top because that's my previous offset with the other file. I want a different kind of ratio, so I'll have to go back to other offset. And here it's going, well, it's going to be about 440 here. All right. So here we see now our pieces. This is where we have to kind of put things back together again, right? We have to figure out how we're going to have these rocks look like they belong together. This one here, and kind of take a look at the shape of it. So I'm going to zoom up a little bit. So I'm seeing that I'm going to have a kind of an angled piece here, right? You see how there's going to be like a little angled piece here I'm going to have to grab. And so I'm going to be looking throughout the rest of this piece if I can find this angled piece. Well, I can see right here I've got something I can maybe use. So I'm going to go ahead and use the clone stamp tool. Click here. I'm going to kind of click and drag a little bit. All right, so far so good. Now that I've got that kind of in there, I want to make sure I get this area the same. I think I'm going to try and go for a lighter tone altogether. So I'm going to go keep from this one over here and maybe grab something like this that will kind of connect the two together. So I can see right now that piece of stone really looks pretty good. I've got to be careful when I get to this part right here. And what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and eventually offset again a different number and kind of work my way around. But right now I'm going to leave this alone. Stay a little away from the edges because I know the edges overlap well. So coming down here, I'm going to hold down the Alt key and maybe grab a little bit of this area right here. And I'll use my brackets on my keyboard, maybe make this a little smaller and kind of take care of that like that. There we go. Looks good. I'm not going to worry about this darkness. I'm really worried about the stones. I want to make the stones match as much as possible. Let's look at this one here. Now this one here is pretty easy because this little piece almost looks like it belongs down here. So I'm just going to do this. I'm going to use the clone stamp tool, press Alt, grab this little corner here, like about here. And then we'll grab over here in the middle a little bit more of this one, like here. Kind of grab up a little ways. And there you go. Grab this corner here, and then maybe come over here a little bit like that. Grab this little corner here. No, which one? This kind of angle. Maybe this one here. See if that'll work a little bit. So we do have some play here that we can. And okay, that looks like a pretty good stone. We have some play here on how the stones are going to work together. This one's going to have to come into like this, it looks like. And well, here, I think I need to break this into 1, 2, 3 stones to make this thing work, to make it look more real. So I need to have a bottom piece here that I can work with, and kind of a rounded bottom. Well, here it looks like a rounded bottom right here. So I'm just kind of, maybe even like this one, right? Kind of a little point, kind of get this bottom on here. And then go over here to this end here, and then come from here and come this way. Right? So I'm kind of blending it. I'll take some more from this stone to get this middle area here. All right. And kind of work my way up. And when I get to this top part, I'm just going to go ahead and kind of move here and kind of come across. There you go. So you're almost becoming like an artist is what it is. You're becoming an artist and finding pieces of rock that you can move from one to the other. And what you're trying to do is remove this line here, and remove these lines so that we don't see these lines. And again, I'm not worried about the background, this mortar that's here. I'm not worried about it. This one's pretty strong color, so I'm going to pick a color. I think I'll be better off picking more of this neutral color than this dark color. So maybe I'll just kind of grab from here, I guess, and come back down in here and kind of work my way up, right? And notice I'm not doing all the way across, but just a good amount across. And then we're coming over here and then kind of grab up in here and then come back around. All right, and then there we go. That looks like it could be real. Maybe I might even grab from this rock here a little bit and kind of bring these lines across. Well, that looks like it's a real rock. So we're going to go ahead, I'm going to go ahead and speed this up, but you can see what I'm going to do. I'm grabbing areas from rocks nearby, rocks with similar kind of tone. Sometimes I'll pick a lighter tone. Like I said, this one here is probably going to be a very much lighter rock. This is just too dark, this area here. And if I can balance it out now, I won't have to worry about balancing it out later. I'll keep working my way around this, and then we will show you the finished project at the first step. So here's the first go around. I think I've got most of the elements looking like solid pieces, but now I'm going to go ahead and run through that offset again and see if something else comes up. So filter, offset. So far so good. I'm going to do one more offset just to make sure that, let's go filter, other, offset, one more just to make sure. Instead of 440, I'm going to do 220. And instead of 250, I'm going to do 125. And let's see if anything shows up. What I'm looking right now is, are there any sharp lines anywhere that are obvious that there's a break or something? Right now, everything looks pretty good. I have a little bit of a concern with this image right here, in that it's going to be one small little thing that might show up over and over again, but maybe not. It just depends on the overall look. So I think it works out pretty well. I'm just kind of looking one more time. And of course, even if we think it's good and we go and start working on it, we don't think it doesn't look as good as we thought it did. We can always come back and again, I want to. I think we're okay here. I think we're okay. I think of the background's what we need to look at next. I'm going to resolve some of this by creating two new layers. And on one layer, I'm going to paint in black, and one layer I'm going to paint in white. And we'll see how that pans out. We'll play around with the visibility of it. So, or you can also go layer, new layer. Or you can also down here, new layer, new layer. I'm going to click on here and rename one of these layers to light, and then one of these layers to dark. I'll make the light layer active, and I'm going to then pick white, and I'm going to go over dark areas. So here's my light layer, and it's white. I'll use my brush, and I'll use a soft round brush, and we'll see the size be good. Maybe 30 or so, 25, 30. And I'm going to paint over all the dark areas. So anything I think is too dark, I'm just going to paint and just. So dark stones, dark rocks, dark whatever, anything that's dark. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of do a quick brush over. Not 100%. That might, I'm going to still give some variation of it. Okay, I think that will do me. There's some darkness in here. Okay, now we're going to dark. So I made the light not visible. I flipped this to dark and black. So where are the light areas here? Well, I think this area here is kind of light. So in areas that are super light, I'm just going to go back into this and kind of get that darkness in there. So let's go ahead and make both layers now active. And I'm going to start just toning down their opacity so that they're not so strong, and just see how if I can minimize the two of them in such a way that I feel like they go together better. So I'm going down to like 10, 12, something like that, for these lights and darks. I think the dark could be maybe a little bit darker, and then I might even go back into the light and paint white in some of these dark areas, so that so basically I'm putting white under the dark to kind of bounce off some of this darkness here. And then vice versa, I will flip to the dark side and see if there's any light areas. I think the light areas are pretty good. It's the dark I'm kind of working on. Maybe it just needs to be a little darker. Okay. I don't want to lose too much of variation, but at the same time, if it becomes too noticeable, So I'm painting some dark areas here just to touch them up just a hair. Got this light really low here. All right, so I think this kind of looks even. I'm seeing a blue cast though. That's kind of bluish up here and not so much bluish here. So we'll see. We'll see how that balances out. But we'll be playing around with that. We're just going to be playing around with that. So we're back at 24% in the dark and 4% in the light. And it just depends on how your image is. You can also set both of these layers to luminosity and see how that affects the overall image. Let's go ahead and save this as it is. File, save as, and we're going to keep it as a Photoshop file because we might need to go back in here again. So save as Photoshop file and stone wall. Yep, that sounds great. There's no other Photoshop file called that, so that'll be fine. And let's go ahead now and do file, save as, and now we're going to save it as a JPEG. We'll do save a copy, and we'll save it as a JPEG. And I'm just going to call stone wall 2. Going to go ahead and switch to SketchUp. I'll use the same wall. Go stone wall 2, and well, there it is. I can see a little bit of the color variation going on. I still have some work to do. I can see right now. Look at that. This banding, right? But overall, it's better. And we would switch between SketchUp and Photoshop, tweaking those spots that kind of stand out. And eventually we get to something that looks something like this. I think this really does work. I don't see that brightness. It took a while, right? It's not a one and done type of operation. I think this wall is very, very good. Notice the name of the material did not change. The last one we used was Rock Face 2, and that's what we changed it to. At this point, I can just go in there and change it to whatever I wanted to call it. So, and that way we don't get confused, because if we start looking for the actual texture called Rock Face, we won't have it. It's this stone wall here. So yeah, this works. Let's open up another file in SketchUp. It's the bank project and bank front. I'm going to have to change this. This is just a practice to just see how it works. So we can do have to change if you don't want to. Leave it up to you. So this is an image here that was used to create this three-dimensional object. So looking at it like from like here, you can see it's exactly what the image would be. But of course, if you turn it around a little bit, you can see that there's some funny things going on here. So this was created using an image. But what I'm looking for right now is this texture right here. Right, this is a SketchUp texture, and you can see that there's like this blotchiness here that is visible. In other words, this is the photograph that we had. This is the texture that was there. So I'm going to go ahead, that we used to replace it. I'm going to go ahead and use my select tool and select that material. It's called Brick Antique. And if I go to edit, I can take this material and take it out of SketchUp and work with it in Photoshop. And here it is. Here's Brick Antique in Photoshop. Zoom up a little bit. So I can see now there's this kind of band right here in the middle that is kind of darker than this other one over here. And so I do want the variation. There's variation in the existing brick, but what I want to do is I want to not overplay one particular color. I need to have that variation of color. This one is a lot more exacting. So I'm almost basically going to replace a brick with a brick. Using the clone stamp tool, I'm going to change the size of it for my circle to pick up, maybe around 15 or so. It's about 15 would be about 15 or so. It's about the size of a brick. See that? Like my cursor is about the whole size of a brick. And I'll replace some of the darker brick here with lighter brick, and vice versa. I might replace some of these brighter bricks with some darker ones. So I'm gonna pick this one first. I'm gonna click. I'm gonna grab like down in here. Click. So I got the bottom corner, and so I'm gonna go over here to this one here, And I'm just going to kind of click and drag. I'm just going to drag inside there. Let's make the opacity 100% here. And let's see what else I can do. Another one here. I can put down here a little bit. And I just get close to the edge. It's the soft round, so the outside edges kind of blur a little bit. But I'm just going to keep grabbing these lighter bricks and finding some darker ones and just kind of replacing. Now this brick is a little shorter or smaller, so I'll go from this end and go back the other way. And then maybe take a darker brick like this and place it over here. Maybe this one's a little bit too bright, right? And if I think it's too dark, do Control Z to undo, I can reduce the opacity to maybe 50%. So what I'm doing now is I'm actually going to be creating kind of a combined texture that's not too dark and not too light, which would also be good. Again, we do want some variation, but right now they're creating like a dark band, and so whatever I can do to minimize that dark band, go back to 100% sometimes, go back to 100%. And notice I'm just kind of clicking and drag. I'm not really worrying about getting every single inch of it to be the same color, because bricks do have some modeling going on here. So I can maybe do the opacity level just a little bit. Yeah. I like that middle tone because it does not zoom up a sec, zoom out, because that's what we're seeing. Okay, there's some darkness here, some darkness up there, so maybe I should focus on some of these now. And I'm shooting for the light, right? I'm shooting to get this thing lighter. Try to find some light ones here. I'm also trying to find light ones that aren't necessarily, next to each other. I don't want to grab rid of this over. This might be an issue, so I'm going to go ahead and grab this one here and kind of tone that down. Remember, if it's really obvious, it's going to stand out when it repeats itself. Let's see, zoom out, zoom back in, pick this one up. I'm going to put the opacity up a little bit here, so I get a nice bright piece. So we are artists again. We are repainting these pieces so that they work better with the design intent of the project. We feel that banding of dark is too much, and so this is a way of toning them down. And I'm using maybe 50%, 80%, 40%, so a couple of down here, and then I think I'm good. I'll go back. We'll say this is done. File, save as, and I'm going to put it in that folder, bank project. And we'll save it as a JPEG brick antique. I'm called 2. When you bring it in, it's going to be a little more orangey colored because the original antique brick is orange, but that's okay. We're going to go to, well, we already selected the brick antique, so we're going to do open. And we're going to go to the bank project folder, click brick antique 2, and you open it, whoop, there it is. Now, just looking at it, there's a lot. I can still see a little darkness here, but in general, it's much better. I think it's much better. And then to get the red back, I'll use this one here and click one of these red areas over here, which I think might work better. There. There's something there, but it's not as strong. It's not as heavy as before, and it's a little bit better the way this model lays out. So that's one way that we can, use an existing SketchUp material and even adjust a little bit to make it match what we'd like it to do. You can see in the lecture when it was take a little bit more time, a little more working through it, that band can go fully away, and it looks pretty good. So this one was an interesting Photoshop. It's an older one because I can tell the formatting is a little different than what it used to, but the idea is still the same. this link here will take you there, and it's very interesting how they found this tile at a show, and they wanted it in their project. This is like a materials presentation. They wanted it in their project. So this little video, an interesting one to watch what they had to do to make that thing work.